My name is Rachel Carter. I'm 33 years old, a systems analyst living in Denver, Colorado. I'm not flashy. I don't wear designer clothes or post vacation selfies on Instagram. But I've always believed in showing love through action, through presence, support, and when possible, generosity. Which is why, when my long-term boyfriend Nathan casually said over brunch, "If you really love me, maybe you could help my sister pay off her student loans too," I froze. The clink of forks, the clatter of brunch chatter around us, it all just faded into silence. I looked at him. He was calm, sipping his coffee like he hadn't just detonated a grenade on the table. That moment didn't come out of nowhere. It came after everything I'd already done. A week earlier, I had paid off Nathan's $22,000 in student debt as a surprise. It wasn't some sugar mama move. I'm not made of money. But I did it because I loved him. Because I thought we were building something real. Because he stayed up nights stressing about it, and I wanted to lift that weight off his shoulders. He never asked me to do it. But I had access to his loan account because he'd once asked for help checking some forms, and I remembered the login. So I made the payment quietly, printed the confirmation, and wrapped it like a gift. When he opened the box and saw what it was, he broke down crying, told me no one had ever loved him like that, said I was the woman he wanted to marry. That moment stayed with me at least until the brunch, when everything started to shift. Because what I thought was love started to feel more like obligation. And what I thought was a gift suddenly became a test. That's when I realized I might have bought peace for Nathan. But I hadn't bought respect. And what came next proved it beyond any doubt. I met Nathan at a mutual friend's game night. He was funny, self-deprecating in a charming way, and had this quiet warmth that made you feel like the only person in the room. He taught high school history, loved hiking, and made the world's worst spaghetti. But somehow I fell for him. I'd been single for a while before that, focused on my career, building stability. I wasn't looking for anything serious. But Nathan was different. He didn't try too hard, didn't play games. He showed up with honesty and intention. Our relationship moved slowly, then all at once. Within a year, we were spending most nights together, sharing groceries, sharing routines. We weren't officially living together, but our lives were already merging: laundry at my place, breakfast at his. Nathan was the kind of man who left sticky notes on my fridge reminding me to eat, who sent me songs on Spotify just because they reminded him of me. He talked about wanting a future marriage, kids, maybe even a golden retriever, if our building ever allowed pets. The only shadow in our life together was money. Nathan wasn't reckless, but he'd gone into teaching straight out of grad school, and still carried that financial burden. His student loans loomed over him like a storm cloud. He talked about them often not in a manipulative way, but more like someone holding onto quiet shame. He'd make jokes about dying with debt and call himself financially doomed, then laugh it off. But I saw the strain. I heard him on the phone with loan services late at night, trying to negotiate lower interest rates. I saw the relief when he managed to pay more than the minimum. One evening, he said, half joking, "If I ever win the lottery, first thing I'm doing is paying off this damn debt." That's when the idea started growing in my mind. I didn't have lottery money, but I had savings. Not a fortune, but enough. And if we were really building a life together, didn't that mean we'd eventually be sharing this debt anyway? He never asked, but I decided. It was a few clicks and a deep breath, and when it was done I felt proud, not because I wanted credit, but because I wanted to see him free. I thought love meant helping carry the weight. But I didn't yet understand what it meant when the one you're helping starts expecting you to carry everyone else's, too. I gave him the gift on a quiet Thursday evening. We had just finished dinner, his attempt at stir-fry, which mostly turned into overcooked noodles and soy sauce. I laughed, as always, and he kissed me on the cheek like he always did when he knew he'd messed up a recipe. Then I handed him the small box. He raised an eyebrow. "What's this? It's not my birthday." "Just open it," I said, suddenly nervous. My heart thumped against my ribs. He peeled the ribbon back, opened the lid, and pulled out the rolled-up paper. He unwrapped it, squinted at the text, and froze. There was a long silence. I started to second-guess everything. Was it too much? Too soon? Too forward? Then he looked up at me, eyes wide, and said nothing, just lunged forward and wrapped me in a hug so tight it took my breath away. I don't know what to say," he whispered. "You did this. You paid it off." I nodded. He pulled back, tears in his eyes. "No one's ever done anything like this for me. Ever." That night he held me closer than he ever had, told me he'd never met anyone like me, said I was his rock. the one person who made him feel safe, that he'd been waiting his whole life for this kind of love. And for the next 48 hours, I believed we were on the same page. He even brought me flowers the next day, sent me texts all afternoon with hearts and I still can't believe it messages. Our conversations turned to wedding plans, nothing concrete, but soft ideas about venues, songs, and someday vows. I thought I had just made an investment in our future. I thought I had taken away a source of stress, replaced it with peace, and deepened our connection. I wasn't expecting anything in return. Not praise, not money, not even a thank you card. But I was expecting respect, and I was hoping foolishly, maybe that this gesture would bring us closer, not open the door to more demands. Because what I didn't realize is that, for some people, generosity isn't a gift. It's a gateway. And once you give a little, they start asking for more, not out of need but out of expectation. It happened that weekend. Nathan had invited me to brunch with his family, his parents, his younger sister Brittany, and us. It was a casual Sunday, warm weather, patio seating, the kind of place where the waiters wear denim aprons and everything costs $10 more than it should. I brought a bottle of rose as a gift. Brittany barely glanced at me when I handed it over. The conversation was light: vacation plans, school updates, Nathan's mom commenting on how tired she looked in selfies. Brittany was scrolling on her phone for most of it, chiming in only when the topic shifted to her nursing program. She was 25, juggling school and part-time work, and from what I'd heard, still living at home. We hadn't talked much over the years, but she was polite enough in the past. And then, mid-mimosa, Nathan set his glass down and said it. "So, babe," he said, turning to me with a smile that felt rehearsed. "Since you helped me, I was thinking, maybe you could help Brittany too." I blinked. Help her with what? Well, her student loans. She's got about $25,000 left, and with everything she's going through, it would mean the world. I thought he was joking. I actually laughed, expecting him to crack a grin and nudge me playfully. But his face didn't change. And Brittany suddenly looked up from her phone, eyes hopeful. "Wait, are you serious? That would be amazing." I put my fork down. My pulse picked up. That's not something I planned for. Nathan leaned in. "I mean, you clearly can afford it. You helped me, and if you love me, really love me, you'd care about my family's burdens too." I stared at him, stunned. Brittany nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, I mean, we're basically sisters now, right?" I excused myself to the restroom before I said something I couldn't take back. I stood there for 10 minutes, staring at myself in the mirror, wondering if I had walked into some alternate universe. I wasn't angry yet, just confused, shocked, like I was being tested without my consent. When I returned to the table, the topic had shifted, but I had changed. Something small in me cracked that day, not from the money, not even the assumption, but from the sudden realization that my love was being measured in dollars. That what I thought was an act of connection had turned into a down payment on someone else's expectations. And worst of all, Nathan didn't even see the problem. To him, I was just being difficult. And to Brittany, I was a missed opportunity. That night, I brought it up gently. We were sitting on his couch, a movie playing in the background that neither of us was really watching. My mind was still at that brunch table, still hearing his words echo, "If you love me, you'd help my family too." "Nathan," I began, "can we talk about what happened today?" He muted the TV and looked at me, casual, like I was about to ask him to take out the trash. "I want to understand," I said. "I helped you because I love you. But your sister's debt, that's not my responsibility." He didn't flinch, didn't even pause. "But if you're serious about this relationship, Rachel, then her debt is part of your future too." My stomach dropped. "I paid your loans," I said carefully. "That was a gift, not a starting point. I did it because I cared, not because I was signing up to be your family's bank." Nathan folded his arms. "You can afford it. And honestly, if you're going to be my partner, I need someone who understands that family means lifting each other up, not drawing lines when things get inconvenient." There it was, his version of love. Not partnership, not mutual care. Just a sliding scale of what he could extract, wrapped in guilt and dressed up as duty. I tried one more time. "I'm not drawing lines to be selfish. I'm drawing them because I have limits. And I need to know you see me as more than what I can give." He shook his head in disbelief, like I'd failed some invisible test. And then he said it. "If you won't help my sister, I'll need to reevaluate this relationship. I can't be with someone who's only generous when it benefits them. I stared at him. That was the moment something inside me stopped negotiating. Not because I was done loving him, but because I finally realized he didn't love me the way I needed to be loved. He loved what I gave him, but not who I was. And no matter how many zeros I could put behind my feelings, that was never going to be enough. So I sat there in silence, staring at the man I thought I'd marry. And quietly, I started planning my exit. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. Nathan was still asleep, breathing steadily beside me. I stared at the ceiling, heart racing, knowing exactly what I had to do. I tiptoed out of bed, made coffee, and opened my laptop. His student loan portal was still bookmarked in my browser. I logged in. The payment I'd made, $22,000, was still marked as pending, not yet finalized. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about the money anymore. It was about clarity, about reclaiming a line that should never have been crossed. I called the loan servicer, explained calmly that I had made the payment in error, that I was the account holder's fiancé and had his permission to access the account, but needed the transaction reversed. There was a long pause. Then questions. Then hold music. Then finally a yes. The representative said they could cancel the transaction before it posted. The funds would be returned within 5 to 7 business days. I hung up and felt a strange mix of relief and heartbreak, like closing a door and realizing it had been open too long. That evening, I sat across from Nathan on his couch again. Same spot, different energy. "I need to tell you something," I began. He looked up from his phone, half interested. "I reversed the loan payment," I said. "It hadn't cleared yet, so I called and had it stopped." For a moment he didn't speak. Then his face twisted into something I hadn't seen before, rage mixed with disbelief. "You what?" he spat. "Are you serious right now?" "I did it. Because you made it conditional," I said evenly. "Because when I gave from love, you turned it into a test. And I failed, apparently." He stood up, pacing. "So what? You're punishing me? Over a conversation? Over me asking you to be part of something bigger?" "You didn't ask," I replied. "You demanded, you guilted. And you told me this relationship depended on my bank account." He pointed at me, trembling. "You're manipulative. You dangled my future in front of me and snatched it back." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "You told me you'd reevaluate if I didn't pay for Brittany, so I'm saving you the trouble." Then I picked up my keys, walked out the door, and didn't look back. The silence I stepped into was louder than the shouting I left behind. But for the first time in weeks, I felt free. A week later, I was scrolling through Instagram when I got the first ping. It was a friend of mine, Jess, someone who always seemed to know everything first. She'd sent me a link to a TikTok with just one message: "You've got to see this." I clicked. There, in full filter and faux tears, was Brittany, Nathan's sister, talking to the camera about broke women who can't handle a man's family responsibilities. She went on about how people who claim to love you should show up financially and not flake when it gets real. I didn't need to guess who it was about. Another friend sent it 5 minutes later, this time with a laughing emoji. "This the girl who thought you'd pay off her loans?" I didn't reply, just watched it play out like a bad sitcom. Then it got worse. 3 nights later, I got a DM from Brittany herself. "Hey," it started. "I just wanted to say sorry if I came off entitled. I didn't mean to make things awkward. I thought maybe it was a nice gesture, you know?" I stared at the message. That could have been the end of it. A weird olive branch. But then, the second message came. "You were really good to my brother. He didn't deserve that. Just saying." Followed by a third. A voice note. I hesitated, then pressed play. Her voice was soft, flirtatious. "Real women who do what you did are rare. If Nathan couldn't appreciate that, maybe he's not your match. Some of us would." I actually laughed, out loud, alone in my apartment. The same woman who sat across from me at brunch, expecting me to drop $25,000 without blinking, was now, what, hitting on me? I left her on read. Not because I was angry, but because I was done explaining my worth to people who only saw me as an ATM with feelings. That was the moment I realized just how twisted it had all gotten. It had never really been about love. It had been about access. And once the door closed, they scrambled not to fix what was broken, but to see what else they could still take. But I had nothing left for them. No more money. No more time. And definitely, no more patience for emotional scavengers in the guise of family. I thought that would be the end of it. But of course, Nathan wasn't finished. A few weeks later, over dinner with Jess, the same friend who sent me Brittany's TikTok, she casually said, "So, you know Nathan's telling people you manipulated him into breaking up, right?" I paused mid-bite. "I'm sorry, what?" She sipped her wine, shrugged like it wasn't shocking anymore. "Yeah, he's saying you promised to take care of him and his family. Got his hopes up. Then pulled it all back to control him." I couldn't help it, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so far from the truth, it felt absurd. Jess leaned in. "He's telling people you used money to hold power over him, that you dangled security like bait, then blamed him for asking for help." For a second, I felt my chest tighten. I knew that stories have power, and sometimes the most convincing lies are the ones built on a kernel of truth. But then Jess said something I'll never forget. "Honestly, most of us know better." One guy literally said, "If I were her, I would have Venmo requested him for wasting my time." That made me smile. Not because I wanted revenge, but because it reminded me I wasn't crazy. I wasn't cruel. I had boundaries. Nathan could tell whatever story he needed to protect his ego. But I didn't need to fight it. The truth has its own weight, its own way of settling in. And the people who mattered? They already knew who I was. They knew how I loved. And they knew how much it cost me to walk away, not in dollars, but in faith. Faith that the next time I'd be seen for who I am. Not for what I could give. 3 months passed. Life had quieted. I was sleeping better, eating better, breathing easier. And then, just as I was starting to forget the sound of his voice, Nathan messaged me. It was long, apologetic, carefully worded. He said therapy had helped him see things more clearly. That he realized how much he'd sabotaged something good. That asking me to pay his sister's debt was out of line, but at the time he felt pressured by his family, by the future, by expectations he never quite knew how to carry. He said he missed me, that he hoped we could meet for coffee, even just for closure. For a split second, I considered it, not because I wanted him back, but because part of me wanted to hear him say it out loud, admit it. But the smarter part of me, the part that had walked out of his apartment with my keys and my pride, already had everything I needed. I typed slowly, carefully. "Thank you for your message. I'm glad you're finding clarity. I hope you continue growing and healing. But I've moved on, take care." He never responded. And that was the last time we ever spoke. But you know what? It was enough. Closure doesn't always come from their mouth. Sometimes it comes from your own peace. From the fact that you made the right choice, even when it hurt. Because loving someone should never mean abandoning yourself. And I wasn't going to do that ever again. Here's what I've learned. Love is not a transaction. Generosity is not a contract. And loyalty should never have a price tag. When someone starts measuring your worth by what you give, how much, how often, how easily, that's not love. That's a negotiation. And in healthy relationships, you don't have to buy your place at the table. I don't regret paying off Nathan's debt, not because he deserved it, but because it showed me who he really was. And more importantly, who I really am. I'm not ashamed of being generous. I'm proud of it. But next time, my love won't come at the cost of my boundaries. My giving won't come without my voice. And my heart won't be handed over to someone who sees me as a solution instead of a partner. So if you're watching this and you've ever felt taken for granted or like your kindness was mistaken for weakness, please hear this. You are not alone, you are not crazy, and you are allowed to say no without guilt. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment, hit like, or share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because your story, your worth, it matters, and it's time we stop apologizing for knowing it.